as the campaigns for the 2023 polls gather momentum, some of the leading presidential candidates are breaking down their manifestos and detailing steps they would take to revive Nigeria's ailing economy. Presidential candidate of the All Progressives Congress, Bola Tinubu, says if he is elected president, he will need the cooperation and support of the private sector to implement the reforms in his economic master plan. Senator Tinubu says he would revive industries by bringing the Nigeria's industrial policy to life through creation of major and minor industrial hubs in each of the geographical zones. He added that his administration will actively participate in the digital economy to birth the fourth industrial revolution and target a minimum GDP growth of between 6 to 10%. Other areas he said he would focus on include agriculture, electricity, and the championing of a buy made in Nigeria to grow Nigeria mantra. Well, joining us now is a lawyer and APC supporter, Oluwaseun Fale. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast. Now, the presidential candidate of the APC acknowledged that our political economy has been imbalanced and is in need of a major reform. When you look at all that he has, reeled out with regards to how he intends to address, the issues with regards to our economy. Talk to us, which of this stands out for you as a way out of the imbalance we have witnessed thus far?
There are a lot of them contained in this economic manifesto. I think first and foremost is the plan to restructure our economic model, where we focus most importantly on export-led growth. You see, and I think most economists have alluded to the fact that the structure of our economy, where we basically export raw materials and then import expensive finished materials, it's not sustainable. So importantly, within the mantra of Ashwaju's economic idea is to refocus Nigeria to begin to export more of our items. But most importantly is also to diversify our income base, our income stream. And that can only be done by increasing our agricultural and manufacturing productivity. Those key issues will, of course, give us a major platform to grow as a country.
It came up, it mentioned the issue of power, and because I asked him some days ago, what in the manifesto is most important to him? And he said is the issue of power generation. Now tell us how you think with power,
bedrock of this sort of productivity that we're looking at, and without power, manufacturing entities and businesses cannot thrive. And so that's very key. Now, if you look at the manifesto, he has said that the issue of Nigerian power cannot be solved overnight, but it will consistently and continue the efforts that the present government has put into power sector, and which is to ensure that our generating capacity, or the power that we're presently generating and that will be incrementally increased would reach Nigerian homes and businesses. And that's continue the sort of investment that the current government is undertaking when it comes to expanding our grid and, of course, ensuring the sustainability of our transmission system. I think that investment and the leadership that we bring to bear within that power sector will see to the sustainability.
You talked about unbundling the transmission part of it.
Yes, he did say that. And I think the power experts have alluded to the fact that the centralization of our transmission sector is really inimical to the growth of the power sector generally. So there will be regional hubs or regional transmission hubs to ensure that transmission is effectively decentralized to make distribution much more easier.
Okay, there's the aspect of agriculture, which you also spoke about, and we know that the current government also was, driving the aspect of agriculture, talking about we eating what we produce. At some point, we had to shut our borders, and all of it. But we still haven't gotten to that point where we can say that we are making so much benefit with regards to agriculture in the country. What do you think we are not getting right that you hope he would address when and if he comes on board?
A couple of things to do with agriculture. I think most importantly is access to finance. It's important to assist agricultural business owners and enterprise to get much more access to finance. I know that the present government has done considerably well with the Anchor Borrower program. Spent over 800 billion assisting almost 4 million farmers, small-scale farmers, to access capital, but that will be dipping under an Ashwaji government. But most importantly is also to increase our percentage of arable land under cultivation. At present, I think about 30% of it is under cultivation to even the West African countries. Beyond that, with agriculture, is also to provide the sort of infrastructure that is required to move the produce from the farm to the market and, of course, to the export hubs. This government has to do, and if you look at some of the infrastructural plans that the manifesto is envisaging, that will see to that, to ensure that movement of those produce, it's much more easier by road, by freight. All of this will add to our productivity.
There's also the aspect of food wastage.
Yes. Which
is a major challenge in the country. How do you want to see that addressed?
Yes, that's very key. That's very key, and that's really one of the areas where we need on the road. Yams, all of that. That's wastage. Now, what Ashwaji has proposed is that in every major cities, major markets, there will be food processing and food storage facilities where produce can be saved and to guard against this sort of wastage. But beyond that, speaking to our food security initiative is to also establish grain reserves to manage this location in supply chain and global trends to at least give us the sort of security that we need where issues like Ukraine war that has occurred and is impacting on supply and prices, and that will give us the sort of stability that we need.
Social condition, security, and so on. There's no way we can say that we're going to really tackle this economy without taking care of two important things. One is security, two, corruption. He has talked about the importance of these two in trying to get the economy going. Would that cause delay?
No, that won't cause delay. But like you said, security is the paramount. I mean, the lives and the safety and protection of lives and property is the most important responsibility of any government. And we must also acknowledge that security is an ongoing, dynamic initiative. Specifically from the security agenda of Ashwaji is that, look, we will continue to increase the personnel that are available for law enforcement and security protection, and from the Nigerian Army to the police to the Air Force, because we feel that at the moment there are not enough of this personnel considering our population. So that also is a job creation element to it. But beyond that is also to look at their welfare, look at their, to upgrade their systems and technology that they have, the equipment, and also, of course, look at the sort of logistic and transportation support that they have. Of course, we also must acknowledge that this present government has spent considerable amount of money and effort in building the capacity of the Nigerian Army. That will be done. But most importantly, also to look at the economic and soft power that is available to deal with these underlying issues of security challenges in our communities, and which is economy, which is the economic situation of people. If government does what it should do by bringing growth and development, then there will be less inclination to crime. There will be less inclination to support terrorist group as as allies and all of that. So that's really winning the hearts and minds of people. Then the other interesting element of our strategy security agenda is also this place and state of police in Nigeria. I mean, you see Nigerian police personnel now providing security for VIP personnel and guarding buildings. That will stop under an Ashwaji government, and they will be refocused to providing free law enforcement duties, while all of this security and VIP movement will be done by the Nigerian Civil Defense Corps. So those initiatives, I believe, will help bring down the security challenges that we have going forward.
Yeah, but the other part of it is the issue of credit and corruption.
Yes. Well, corruption is, of course, we know the issue, but with corruption, basically, importantly, Ashwaji has said that he's going to give dedicated leadership in the fight against corruption, and it's really by refocusing the civil service, by eliminating wastages, by ensuring that government spending is only mainly for government purpose, and of course putting a cap on public expenditures relating to buildings and recurrent expenditures generally. Those issues, and I think with corruption mainly, beyond the general national reorientation that we require, it's really a place of leadership, how much leadership we see in the face of the fight against corruption. And when we speak about corruption with this government, you know, it's funny when people say, oh, this current APC government is corrupt. But all of the news that come to fore about corruption, we fail to realize that it's still the same government that has arrested and brought those things to fore. And then that shows that it's really, really fighting internally corruption. Like somebody told me that it takes a very, very pious and truthful president for its accountant general to be arrested on humongous charges of corruption. It must really be above board. But the government doesn't get credit for that. What you see is people taking, taking it, or the other way to as if it's the government itself that is corrupt. The government is fighting corruption. That's why we hear this news. That's why we see those accusations and those charges being brought to even some of these government officials.
Yes, you need to elaborate on what is said about credit and corruption.
Yes, thank you for that. If you look at the social impact of this sort of financial structure that we have, Ashwaji believes that is what fuels corruption. And we've discussed it extensively. The act of buying goods and services, particularly homes and certain consumer items, cash and carry, without the requisite credit facility that we know in saner climes, is really what is really behind the penchant for corruption. We see no reason why homes of millions of naira should be bought on a cash and carry basis, really. And it is by institutionalizing the reforms that we require in our credit system that then the pressure to really acquire these things one time will die down. And I think that as a civil servant, if I know that the mortgage payment home and of some of the items that I've purchased is tied to my work and my continuous engagement at that work, I'll be mindful of actions and steps that I take that will make me lose my job and certainly then lose the income to pay for my house and pay for my mortgage. So those things really have an impact on how we behave. And I believe that with providing the sort of leadership, because if you look at Ashwaju's agenda on consumer loan, he said, look, he will work with the central bank to ensure that banks dedicate a portion of their loan portfolio to consumer lending. And if that is done, eventually...
What is consumer lending?
Consumer lending, I want to buy a TV, I want to buy a fridge, I want to buy a car, those sort of things that we buy full payments, cash and carry now. It helps when you can finance these things and pay instrumentally over the years or over months, and that way you're not under pressure to steal or to engage in corrupt activities.
Yeah, like if you live in a Western country, You can live in a house. Everything there, the house itself, you have not finished paying. Your TV, you have not finished paying. Your refrigerator, you have not finished paying. Your washer and dryer, you have not finished paying. But you are using all of them and you are the owner. Even your furniture, you have not finished paying.
But
but you have all of them.
Yes.
So there's no need for you to say you are going to steal in order to buy a TV or a sound system or anything like that.
So what that does is, for those guys that you just described, they don't take their work seriously. They go to work on time. They do their bit on work because they know that's the platform where they maintain and the enjoyment of those things. So it will speak to a lot of our social lifestyle if this sort of credit is available.
Yeah, but there's a problem. Sorry, there's a problem that data. That would all of these programs not be delayed because of certain incidentals like data security. You have to get all these things secure before you can work all of that.
Those things will be engaged and tackled, and in part of our security or our strategic security initiative is, of course, to aggregate all of our national data for security purposes, for economic planning purposes, and those will be useful in projecting this sort of initiatives that we're talking about.
Now, there's this initiative championing of Buy Made in Nigeria to grow the Nigeria mantra that is said to be also championing. At some point in Nigeria, we talked about Buy Nigeria, Grow the Naira, and all of it. But we know that a lot of Nigerians do not, believe in buying Nigerian-made things, items, so to speak. So it's something that has to begin with the mind, addressing the minds of people to even appreciate what is being done in Nigeria, for them to want to purchase what is being made in Nigeria, so to speak. So how do you see him addressing this aspect? Because it's a lot of work. At the time when we talked about Buy Nigeria, Grow the Naira, a lot of people did not embrace it.
Yes, that's a challenge. Like I said, leadership, and I think that leadership will come with a carrot and stick approach. What is important as a government is to begin some form of import substitution mechanism where we're discouraging the importation of luxury items, because when you look at those items, some of them mostly are luxurious, and encouraging the production of those items locally. But of course, government must ensure that they meet certain standards that we expect of the sort of items that we're encouraging. And that encouragement will come by way of tax incentives and grants to spur growth for the manufacturing of those things. When you look at the gamut of Ashwaji agenda, you will see that there are a lot of tax incentives. Government will use some of its fiscal powers to encourage manufacturing, to encourage job creation, to encourage growth, and that's very key. And I see a lot of people asking how is it going to do that? Those how are in that document. Giving tax incentives, encouraging the employment of certain quota of young people in business, and then you get a tax rebate in that. That's on how, and that's really a way to spur growth, in our economy.
All right. You want to say something?
Yeah. The budget is trying to change the way budget is benchmarked. So can you speak to that?
Yes. According to his thinking, mostly our budgeting process is usually tied to dollar. Every time you see, we will earn, dollar is projected at $70 to 1 naira or $250 to 1 naira, and that forms the basis of our budget and budgetary preparations. And what you then see is that once there is a change in that base and parameters, everything is thrown away and thrown to the dog. But what our strategy is proposing is that our budgetary mechanism and process will be based on growth. What do we want to achieve as a people? I want 6% GDP. That growth can be at least in front of me, and I will work towards it. So our budgetary cycle will be growth-led, and that really will speak to sort of infrastructure that you want to provide and build in order to germinate growth within the system. And
so
that's
you're
very
talking
key.
about it's a budget based on ambition rather than on
forecast,
currency
yes,
or forecast.
Currency forecast. And,
Yeah.
and I think it just speaks to the level of ambition that you have for your economy. If you believe that your system and your economic productivity can achieve certain level of growth, then you budget for it. If I think that if I construct the road from Lagos to Calabar, I know the sort of economic activities that will bring forth in the connecting areas, then I will spend the money. And which speaks to the idea of debt and, because sometimes we talk about how government will fund and debt. Money doesn't fall into government from any other places except those two. Are we raising tax or are we raising debt? Clearly, Ashwaja has said that he will not raise taxation under his dispensation, but he will expand the tax net to ensure that a lot of people and more people are paying their fair share of tax. And then he will make judicious use of that taxation to show transparency, to show leadership, to commit to people to pay more. And of course, debt. He said we would contract debt obligations responsibly, such that all debt obligations that will be contracted will be tied to specific projects that are either going to pay themselves or pay the proceeds of that debt, or at least be incremental to our infrastructural development, such that we will see it in the growth that we want. So those are key issues that that is relevant for Nigerians to know. And I dare say that if we look at all of the manifesto of other parties, I've not seen any manifesto that really details the how of how they want to achieve this sort of economy.
Have you read all other manifestos?
I have looked at it. I've looked at it, even though I haven't read them in much detail. But I mean, the feedback that I get from some of their, promoters have not been detailed as to the extent of how we want to deal with some of the issues.
Now, there's the aspect of the digital economy, which he said his administration will actively participate in to birth the fourth industrial revolution and also target a minimum GDP growth of between 6 to 10%. There are those who think this is ambitious.
It is not ambitious. Already you see the impact of Nigerian tech industry in Africa, so to speak. We, out of almost about $5 billion investment into African tech space, Nigeria accounted for at least 60–70% of that. So the potentials are there. And what is then required is to build the capacity and provide the enabling environment. As we have enough population and background to begin to take advantage of some of these ICT-enabled outsourcing services that we think will also contribute to that growth.
Speak to these hubs.
The technological hubs.
Not only technological, economic hubs.
I mean, so if you look at the industrial plan of Ashwaju, what is envisaging is that at every region we will have industrial hubs where we will take advantage of the existing resources within
comparative
that region.
Advantage.
Yes, and then those. So if you look at the Northwest and North Central, for example, we have a lot of mineral resources, gold and all of that. That invariably is even fueling the sort of conflict that the government is dealing with now. So what he's envisaging is that we will, in that area, set up industries and, in that area that will begin to mine those resources, that will begin to develop those resources for the benefit of the community and stakeholders and the benefit of the country. And you come to the Southwest, you look at our own comparative advantage, and then you support the industry around that. And that way, people are able to really thrive in their environments, and then you reduce rural to urban migration, also in that state.
Back to the aspect of the digital economy, you know that for countries in Africa, majority of countries, and even Nigeria, the aspect of the use of the internet has not been deepened as such. It hasn't even penetrated certain areas.
I mean, if we say that we want to increase GDP growth by, increasing the output from the digital economy, it's important that we also deepen our broadband access and, internet access to usage. Ashwaju has promised that in his 4 years of government, at least 90 to 95% of Nigerians will have access to broadband connectivity. And that's already being done by government's initiative to reduce the cap and specify a cap as to how much you can lay fiber optic around the country. That's a significant boost to the industry, and that will help down the line to ensure the sort of penetration we need to boost e-commerce. And importantly also is look at our e-commerce ecosystem. We know that there's vibrancy in that. People now do business by Instagram and WhatsApp and supply far-flung places. And what government needs to do and what Asiwaju will do to further encourage and deepen this sense of entrepreneurship is to provide the sort of logistic and haulage infrastructure that is required to make those businesses thrive. I mean, if e-commerce, the backbone of e-commerce is real good public transportation model where people can move from one place to the other. You can deliver your goods and all of that, and that will be at the forefront of the
and sequel to that is the aspect of cybersecurity, which is also a major challenge.
Of course, data protection, and just to ensure that all of the data and information that we're sharing online is safe and secure. And I think that's where leadership and government regulations will come into place. And I have no doubts that that will be what Asiwaju will bring to the table as the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Oil and gas. How much thinking has gone into the challenges of getting a pipeline through the Sahara?
So with our oil and gas, the most important thing from an incoming government of Asiwaju perspective is to earn as much resources as we can from our natural resources to take advantage of global prices in oil. And when we speak specifically to our oil and our crude aspect, Asiwaju has said that it will increase our production barrel per day from what it is now to 2.6 million in the first year, and then to 4.6 million by the end of the decade, in the first 3 years, and then the 4.6 million by the end of the decade.
We'll have to leave the conversation here now, but we must thank you, Lawyer Oluwaseun Faleye, for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Are you a